Good morning, everybody. Hello. Is everyone in? Everyone's in. Hello. Good morning. I'm Amanda Coakley. I'm the MC. I am a journalist. I mainly write for Foreign Policy, covering Central and Eastern Europe. And welcome to day 2 of the Belgrade Security Conference. I'm delighted to have you. If you were here yesterday, I hope you had a lovely evening. So we're going to start today with the academic event, and this is a tradition of this conference. Academics have been asked to submit papers, and the best papers have been selected, and they're going to present them here this morning to us. And obviously, each paper fits the panel that they're on. But first of all, we're going to have welcome remarks by Vladimir Valdes Garcia. He's the head of Democratization Department at the OSCE mission to Serbia, and Richard Steyne, the program manager in the Policy and Research Department of the DCAF, Geneva Center for Security Sector Governance. So I will let them come in with their welcome remarks, and thank you.
So, good morning, everyone. Dear Richard, dear Luka, dear distinguished experts, members of the Academic Alumni Network, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to have the opportunity to be part of today's academic event of this conference. As you know, the OSCE mission to Serbia has been supporting the Belgrade Security Forum as predecessor of this conference since the very beginning in 2011. Apart from its proven quality and relevance, the conference, its idea, and values reflect the essence of the OSCE and the OSCE's broad concept of security, which goes beyond traditional military security, disarmament, and border issues. Namely, the OSCE, as largest regional security organization, has a comprehensive approach to security that encompasses politico-military, economic and environmental, and human aspects. This approach is based on the conviction that security, human rights, and the rule of law are indispensable and inseparable in security sector governance. All OSCE participating states agree that a lasting security cannot be achieved without environmental awareness, respect for human rights, functioning democratic institutions, and adherence to the rule of law. In addition, the OSCE has affirmed the link between security and sustainable development since its beginning with the signing of the Helsinki Final Act in 1975. Its comprehensive approach to security rests on the recognition that conflicts may arise not only from political and military threats, but also from economic tensions, environmental degradation, social insecurity, and violation of individual rights, which are all relevant when aiming for the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. In today's world of interdependent security challenges within and across borders, security actors need to adapt to fast-changing and unpredictable environments. The development of an accountable and inclusive security sector goes hand in hand with good governance, thus effectively providing security to all of its citizens, while at the same time guaranteeing stability, trust, and confidence. And this should be both regionally, but also internationally. Through the project Consolidating the Democratization Process in the Security Sector in Serbia, the mission has actively involved in strengthening democratic civilian oversight of the security sector, partnering with Serbia's security sector institutions, with independent bodies, the parliament, civil society organizations, and academia. Their ownership of the processes and ultimately of the successes achieved is crucial for sustainability. We are therefore grateful to the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency for the support to this project since 2010. The mission's support to the academic event of this conference is part of its wider efforts to expand democratic expertise and educational opportunities in the area of security. And this is done by supporting a scholarship program for master's and PhD students of security studies of the University of Belgrade. This has been ongoing for a decade already. We wholeheartedly support the engagement and the connectivity of young people. We recognize them as indispensable partners in furthering the peace and security agenda, as well as reform process. In 2015, the mission built upon the achievements of the scholars by creating the Academic Alumni Network, aiming to facilitate their communication and coordination in the security sector reform. The network's exceptionality and uniqueness lies in the diverse expertise of its members, as well as in the wide spectrum of institutions they all work for. A significant part of academic life, especially at the PhD level, is participating in expert conferences, including presenting individual work. These experiences allow members of the academic community to change views and exchange views and experiences with their peers, to discuss their research findings and develop new ideas. In this vein, the mission is proud to be a regular contributor to this conference, and it is an excellent opportunity for young scholars, researchers, and professionals from the region and beyond to gather and engage. The way ahead includes overcoming challenges and differences through constructive dialogue. This should be in the true spirit of cooperation. I am therefore encouraged by the ambitious agenda of this conference, and I'm looking forward to hear the views, the presentations, and the findings of our distinguished experts from all over the world. Once again, let me thank you for being part of this, and I'm wishing all of us a fruitful day and fruitful discussion. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Dear Excellencies, ladies, gentlemen, esteemed speakers, it's an honor to be here today. Before I begin, though, I'd like to thank the organizers, the Belgrade Center for Security Policy, who I know have worked tirelessly over the last few months to bring this event together. I'd also like to thank the academic chair, Dr. Luka, Glusac, for his support and efforts in making today possible. My name is Richard Steyne, and I am the program manager at the Geneva Center for Security Sector Governance. Also known as DCAF, my organization are the proud co-sponsors of the academic event at this year's Belgrade Security Conference. Allow me to also thank the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of the Netherlands for their generous support in making today possible. We have a packed and excited agenda this morning, and I'm very much looking forward to the discussions that will follow. Before I hand over to Dr. Glusac, permit me, though, to reflect for a few moments on today's academic event and the topic in question, namely the security development nexus. We are living through turbulent times. Indeed, 3 decades since the renowned political scientist Francis Fukuyama proclaimed the end of history, our dreams of a safer, fairer, and more just world arguably seem to be slipping away. From the climate crisis to the rise in authoritarianism, nationalism and populism, from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic to the devastation brought about by the war in Ukraine, from food insecurity to the prospects of another global recession. The crises we are living through often seem overwhelming and the solutions wanting. What do all these challenges have in common? Perhaps that they all require collective action in order to be overcome. But how to achieve collective action in today's world, where we seem to be witnessing a regression from a rules-based system into one characterized by power-based strategies? Indeed, if history teaches us one thing, it is that major shifts in the global order present opportunities, but also threats. Opportunities to reinvigorate or reform the liberal order, perhaps, or threats to the very system of multilateralism upon which it is based. I don't pretend to have the answers to these questions. I can say one thing with certainty, though. Platforms such as the Belgrade Security Conference are crucial for identifying solutions to these challenges and answers to these questions. How then does the security development nexus, the topic of today's academic event, fit into this rather gloomy picture that I've just painted? Well, the security development nexus was conceived in the early 2000s as a means to both address the causes of conflict and implement post-conflict reconstruction in a way that reduced the chances of conflict reoccurring. In doing so, it also promised to make the global order more resilient to non-security related threats, some of which I've just outlined. Since then, the Security Development Nexus has firmly established its place in the global policy-making arena. Understanding this nexus has been hailed as the key to success. Security and development, it is often said, mutually reinforce each other to create peace and prosperity. Security, it is commonly held, is the first precondition for development. Indeed, in the words of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, there can be no development without peace, and no peace without sustainable development. The Security Development Nexus has also provided the theoretical framework for military and non-military action in conflict-affected and fragile areas. Notwithstanding the many critiques of international interventionism, what is undeniable is that we are witnessing a retreat from liberal hegemony and associated conceptions of liberal peacebuilding and towards shorter-term stabilization efforts and democratic backsliding. This reorientation promises to have profound effects on all of us and arguably brings into question the validity of the very concept of the Security Development Nexus. For how else are we to understand the rise in global insecurity when the Security Development Nexus promised so much? What has failed in our conceptualization or operationalization of the Security Development Nexus is something missing from the puzzle. It is within this context that I want to bring in the perspective of the organization which I represent, the Geneva Center for Security Sector Governance. Our organization, established by the Swiss government in the year 2000, supports states and multilateral organizations in applying the principles of good governance to the provision, management, and oversight of security. We firmly believe that a transparent and accountable security sector is a key enabler of peace, and by extension, sustainable development. We also believe that the global development paradigms, such as the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, have failed to adequately take into account the need for good security sector governance. Nevertheless, we also hold that the 2030 Agenda, and in particular Sustainable Development Goal 16 on peace, justice, and strong institutions, provides opportunities to reinvigorate the Security Development Nexus and to place good security sector governance at its heart. It is for these reasons that since 2019, we have been implementing a program with the aim of linking good security sector governance to SDG 16. Specifically, the program aims to position security sector reform as a policy tool for realizing SDG 16. It aims to support security sector oversight actors to realign their strategic priorities with the 2030 Agenda. And it aims to develop SDG-specific guidance to support states in the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. Indeed, outside in the so-called recharge room, you will find a selection of knowledge products developed under this program. With that said, I want to end this short intervention by reflecting on a quote by the former president of the UN General Assembly, Miroslav Lajčák. Quote, "Security actors hold the tools which can bring societies back from the brink of conflict or push them over the edge," end quote. For security actors to be a force for good, it is my conviction, for security actors to be a force for good, they must be subject to effective oversight and control. It is my conviction that without this, the Security Development Nexus may be compromised, and with it, the chances of achieving a more inclusive, safer, and fairer world for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. So now I'd like to introduce the academic chair, Dr. Luka Glusac, and he is the Assistant Director and Research Fellow at the Institute for Philosophy and Social Theory at the University of Belgrade. Welcome.
Thank you, Amanda, and good morning, everybody. And thank you all for taking part in the academic event of the Belgrade Security Conference. We have gathered to discuss the nexus between security and development, or put it more precisely, the role of the security sector in achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. I'm thankful to the OSCE mission to Serbia and also to DCAF, Geneva Center for Security Sector Governance, our partners in this endeavor, for recognizing the importance of this topic and for partnering with us in this year's academic event. And indeed, achieving the 2030 Agenda and 17 Sustainable Development Goals set by the head of the states in 2015 requires partnership, requires joining forces. And there is no other way to achieve this set of ambitious, far-reaching and comprehensive goals. And actually, it was the lack of partnership and lack of common effort that brought us to this point. because the mere existence of the 2030 Agenda is the evidence of our failure. If we have managed to fulfill the Millennium Development Goals, there would not have been the need to come up with the Sustainable Development Goals. However, the SDGs are also the proof of our devotion to persist, to change, and also commitment to make our world a better place. So, are we on a good track to making the world a better place? I have to say, not even close. We have underperformed already in the first 5 years of implementation, and then with the COVID-19 pandemic, the slow progress was only replaced with a steady regress. And then the Russian aggression on Ukraine happened. However, as we are surrounded by wars, I would like to counter this by speaking about peace. And not about any peace, but a positive peace. The students of peace and conflict studies would know that I've referred to Johann Galtung, who differentiates between negative and positive peace, but also invoke the late Professor Vojin Dimitrievich, who has differentiated positive and negative security in his seminal piece on the concept of security in international relations almost 50 years ago. Positive peace includes not only the absence or reduction of violence and war, but also the presence of positive components that enable and sustain peaceful growth and peaceful change. Those positive components refer to the presence of equity and harmony, including the presence of restorative relationships, social systems that serve the needs of society, and the elimination of structural violence. So positive peace serves to prevent future violence. And defined like this, Galtung's positive peace may be understood as the conceptual foundation of the entire 2030 Agenda. With this agenda, world leaders have promised to end poverty and hunger everywhere, combat inequalities within and among countries, build peaceful, just, and inclusive societies, protect human rights, and promote gender equality, empowerment of women and girls. I would like to argue that there are two connected objectives of the 2030 Agenda: to leave no one behind, but also to leave no one unaccountable. To leave no one behind recognizes the dignity of human person is fundamental, and determination to reach the furthest behind first. To leave no one unaccountable responds to the global crisis of accountability, particularly in terms of the accountability of the security sector. We are witnessing the rise of the surveillance state. New technology, including artificial intelligence, has become regular. Oversight mechanisms are lagging behind. Professional security institutions are becoming tools of both elected and non-elected officials. Even more worrisome is the creation of parallel structures with even more advanced technical equipment capable of tracking our every move. The security apparatus is also increasingly involved in the large-scale development projects, particularly when such projects do not enjoy the support of local communities. Sometimes they are employed to clear the terrain, in other places to enforce expropriation, elsewhere to keep the protesters away, or even run those projects themselves. Thus, development is not an exclusively positive notion. It may indeed bring negative effects on nature, human development, and human rights. And as we have witnessed this worldwide, understood in narrow terms and applied selectively, security and development may indeed contribute to authoritarian tendencies. Authoritarianism leads to bad governance, and then, of course, bad governance disregards individual freedoms and rights. Thus, we have to firmly nest sustainability in the security development nexus. With the rising negative effects of development projects on the environment, to sustain means to resist. To resist our urges to think only in terms of investments and material gains, to resist our urges to make this planet unlivable, but also to resist thinking only about our own interest, but also to sustain in our pursuit of democracy. It is thus our aim to underline the sustainable feature of development. To make development sustainable, we have to add good governance and human rights to the equation. This essentially means guiding ourselves by the principles of good security, good governance, and good security sector governance. And this is the idea of this year's academic event of the Belgrade Security Conference, with which we actually aim to contribute to filling this both conceptual and empirical gap. The academic event seeks to provide a platform for a more elaborated discussion on different aspects of the complex relationship between security and development, particularly in the framework of SDGs. We aim to invigorate debate on the relationship between security and human rights, as well as between human rights and development, both sometimes erroneously discussed as conflicting notions. Discussion about a mutual relationship between these notions is particularly needed in politically unstable, fragile, and conflict contexts, as national leaders tend to pursue security at the expense of rule of law and human rights. To envelop this, we are firstly interested in the nexus of security, development, and human rights. What are the conceptual links between security and development, and what are the opportunities the Sustainable Development Goals offer to unite the two discourses in practice? And how does the promise of leaving no one behind in the light of 2030 Agenda respond to the threats of conflict, insecurity, weak institutions, and limited access to justice? These are some of the questions our speakers seek to address in the panel focused on the different aspects of security development and human rights nexus. Today, we will start with the presentation of Oya Dursun-Özkanca, who will present the main finding of her recently published book, which provide a first comprehensive attempt to examine the conceptual linkages between security sector governance and reform and Sustainable Development 16. The book is available online in open access format, but also here in print in the recharge room, as Richard mentioned. We'll then move to Maria Fileva, who will explore the challenges the states and their institutions face in realizing SDGs. Lauren Love presents the key findings of her research with Liam Monk on the practitioners' participation of the security development nexus in practice, focusing on the ways to increase the effectiveness of cross-sector collaboration. But how are the concepts of security and development understood in highly centralized or autocratic societies, and how does this understanding affect the realization of human rights in such contexts? We will turn to Mabda Siddiq, who joined us virtually from Indonesia, to discuss the Chinese approach to cyber sovereignty and its normative power. Our second panel today explores the security development in fragile and conflict environments. What lessons should be learned from its application, and what opportunities the security development nexus has provided for driving peace, security, and sustainable development, particularly in the Global South? How do autocratic leaders securitize development issues to provide themselves with more control over public discourse and opinion? Aleksandra Krstic demonstrates how the concept of the borders has been used as a powerful visual narrative in the media representation of the relationship between security and human rights in the context of migration. In many places worldwide, migrations have been actually caused by climate changes and the scarcity of resources. And the scarcity of resources affects many communities and has been a direct or indirect cause of a number of armed conflicts. Jainisha Patel and Amanda Lucy look at the distribution of those resources in central Mali, northeastern Kenya, and northern Mozambique, and its effect on peace and security on both national and regional levels. How is the security development nexus as an international development policy strategy implemented in conflict-prone and post-conflict contexts? And what lessons should be learned from its application? Zdenek Rod analyzes the lessons learned from the US provincial reconstruction teams in Afghanistan. Finally, the security sector itself is subject to many major developmental projects affecting their operational effectiveness and long-term readiness to fulfill their mandate. Esha Banerjee analyzes the Agnipath scheme, a very interesting strategic project of the Indian Armed Forces aimed at decreasing an average age of armed forces personnel, but with potentially severe consequences on the rights of those new armed forces personnel and their future professional trajectories. As this somewhat brief overview of our presentations indicates, we have a truly global academic event, with 8 panelists coming from 8 different countries and 5 continents. As a chair of this year's academic event, I'm thrilled that our call for papers attracted so many great proposals. We tended to publish the best papers in the Journal of Regional Security following the usual peer review procedure. Today, our panelists will present their key findings, and I invite you to follow the journal webpage in the upcoming months if you're interested in reading their findings in full length. I'm particularly pleased that the call has been so well received by excellent female researchers who actually make 7 out of 8 panelists. So, it is time for men to organize and facilitate, and then for women to lead, speak, and be heard. With that, I thank you for your attention. Thank you.